With Wolves captain Nelson Semedo's departure all but confirmed, it leaves Vitor Pereira and Wolverhampton Wanderers in a bit of a sticky situation this summer. So let's speak about the right back dilemma at the club and how I think Vitor Pereira should attack next season. Now let's get straight into this one. Now, Wolves are in a bit of a sticky situation with regards to the right backs. They've got Matt Doherty at the club, who played predominantly as a right-sided centre-half last season due to Mosquera's early injury and an injury that kept him out all season and actually for most of pre-season as well. Now, Matt Doherty was absolutely really consistent last season, in my personal opinion. I think he played really, really well in that right centre-back position, and he did also have that ability and that licence to venture forward. He managed 2 goals, 2 assists last season, and generally was really, really consistent for Wolves. And to be fair, against all odds, really, no one was expecting Doherty to come in and play 35 games last season, but he absolutely did step up and was key when Vitor Pereira came in, a key part of that back line. So, he's brilliant, but I don't think Wolves should be going into the season relying on Matt Doherty again. I think there's a lot of risks involved in that. Obviously, he'll be another year older as soon as the season starts, really. You're going to have a 34-year-old Matt Doherty by the end of next season. And I just think it's going to be quite a tough sort of ask for him to play that many games again. Obviously, against the likes of, some of the quickest wingers in Europe, in the world. I think it's going to be quite tough for him. I don't think it's the worst option to have as a backup. Don't get me wrong. I think he's absolutely outstanding as a backup option and also as that right centre-back option as well for Wolves. But I do think it's a massive risk going into the season, again, relying on Matt Doherty because, like I say, he's extremely reliable. But in terms of, Wolves wanting to go on and have higher ambitions and be able to have a solid, stable sort of back line, I think Matt Doherty probably isn't the number one option for that next season, despite having such a consistent year last year. And I do think for Wolves and for Vitor Pereira, it's definitely something they need to consider in looking at the current right-back options at the club or dipping into the market. So let's look at the next right-back that I think Vitor Pereira could potentially lean on. The next option for right-backs is Ki-Jana Hoever. Now, he's played 101 games since leaving Wolves in 2022 on loans. He's played at PSV, he's played at Stoke City, and he's played at Auxerre. Now, he's obviously played in the Europa League in that time, played in the Dutch Cup, the Championship, and in League One as well. And generally, he has a lot of experience in a load of different leagues, and he's still only 23 years old. And as a Liverpool fan myself, I massively rated Ki-Jana Hoever coming through. And Liverpool clearly did. I mean, including him in the deal as part of Diogo Jota wasn't something to, to sort of, irritate Wolves and be sort of, a bit sneaky with them. It was something that they genuinely believed would be a perfect fit for him and thought he would come in and play really, really well for Wolves. And I definitely did at the time as well. And I understand that Ki-Jana Hoever hasn't really made himself sort of popular with the Wolves fans, given the way that he sort of treated the club and sort of acted a few years back. But I do think that there's definitely something in the Ki-Jana Hoever talk. Obviously, we saw in the game against Burnley for Jorgen Strand Larsen's goal, Ki-Jana Hoever's work for the goal and the assist is absolutely brilliant. And he's been so consistent wherever he's been the last few years, really. Absolutely brilliant for Stoke City. They massively rated him there. Really sort of important in Auxerre last season as well. Really had a good season there by his standards, really, and sort of, there was a few off games, there was a few periods where he wasn't on it, but throughout the season, generally, quite a consistent performer. And then, of course, at PSV, again, a consistent performer there as well. So I do think it'd be very important to see if Wolves can utilise him next season. I think they'd be sort of daft not to, really. Obviously, he'll be going into the season with less than a year on his deal. And I think Wolves may as well have a look at him because I do think he's a really viable option for them at fullback. He's got that creativity, he's got that pace, he's got that tenacity. He is very similar to Nelson Semedo, but perhaps arguably has more physicality to his game and actually maybe potentially a yard of pace as well. But for me, Ki-Jana Hoever is a really valid option. I understand that there's going to be qualms with Wolves fans because of the way that he has acted in the past, but I do think he's one of these players that's probably moved on from that. And I do think if Vitor Pereira wants him, he'll take him under his wing. And I think he could be a really useful asset for Wolves next season. Let me know what you think about this one, Wolves fans, because I do think it's going to be very controversial if Vitor Pereira does bring him in and then he has a few bad games. Obviously, you'll all be on his back because of the way he sort of acted a few years ago. So I understand that completely. So let me know in the comments your thoughts on that one. And let's get into the next right-back option. Next up, the final right back at the club is Pedro Lima. Now, this is a really risky option for me, and I don't think Wolves should go into the season with Pedro Lima as their starting fullback. Definitely not, considering he only played 6 games last season. I think he played 28 in Brazil the season before, but generally, I think it's a massively risky option. 19 years old, physically, he looks absolutely miles off it, and that's expected. You know, he's a very small sort of fullback in stature, and also the physicality of the Premier League is just a completely different breed. And you look at the goal against Burnley the other day in the friendly, and it is a friendly, of course, but that's what we've seen when Pedro Lima has played, as well as the fact that, you know, he's lightning quick and he's brilliant going forward, but defensively, you know, he's got massive sort of frailties. And I do think that it's going to be one of them things where if you play Pedro Lima for probably the first game of the season against Manchester City, you're going to get absolutely done, especially at the back post, especially in those sort of duels, really, in those physical battles. And you looked at that goal, and it was so lacklustre from him at the back post. His defending was awful. And for me, Pedro Lima does have a lot of things that need to be ironed out. I personally think a loan for Pedro Lima would work. I think Wolves could go into the season with Ki-Jana Hoever and Doherty and potentially bringing a new right back in, which we will speak about in a second. But I do think Pedro Lima either needs a loan or really needs to sort of step his game up in order to sort of break into Vitor Pereira's starting lineup and put that trust that Wolves fans had when they've seen them glimpses of him in games. Because he's absolutely brilliant going forward. I have zero doubts about that. I think he got 1 assist in his 6 games last season. I think he only played about 200 odd minutes as well. So, you know, relatively impressive for a fullback. But I do think that it's a massive drop off from him and the other right backs at the club personally. Obviously, Ki-Jana Hoever's been there and he's got 4 more years in the game than Pedro Lima. You know, he's played in the Europa League, he's played in these levels. Doherty's played Champions League, played in the Europa League, played in the Premier League for a number of years. And I just think he really could benefit from a Championship loan. Perhaps I think to learn the physicality of England, I think the Championship is the best place to go. We've seen the likes of Preston taking Alvaro Carreras, who's obviously now ended up at Real Madrid, absolutely brilliant at Preston, and that was a prime example of, you know, a fullback that wasn't ready at Manchester United, learned him out to the Premier League, learned the physicality, and now, you know, he's obviously gone on to play for Benfica really well, and then gone on to play for Real Madrid ultimately. But I do think Pedro Lima would massively benefit from a loan. Let me know what you think about Pedro Lima, Wolves fans as well, because I know he's one that definitely divides opinion among the fan base. And let's get into the final right back option. Now, finally, is the most highly touted right-back option for Wolves this summer in Marc Pubill. Now, he's been absolutely brilliant for Almeria this season. He's been absolutely ridiculous. So consistent throughout the season. 22 years old. Again, a good age profile. For me, I do think it's probably worth just taking the gamble on Ki-Jana Hoever because, like I say, he's only a year older. But I do think Marc Pubill is also a valid option, and also you could bring him in if you're set to loan let Pedro Lima out. You know, he's a very, very progressive modern fullback, very, very comfortable on the ball. I think he had 4 assists last season in the league as well and 1 goal. He also really impressed me in the European Championships. I think he was in the Team of the Week once in that tournament as well. Popped up with a goal against Slovakia, I believe, as well. And I just think he had a really, really good tournament. And I do think that his market value is probably going to be around 10 to 15 million, which isn't too bad. Obviously, you know, it's relatively high risk, again, coming from the 2nd division in Spain. I do think it is a massive risk. But again, you know, Vitor Pereira seems to like him. The people at the club seem to like him. The scouts seem to be impressed with him. And obviously AC Milan are also in for him. So that also tells you all you need to know, really. I think he's so strong in the duel. I think he's so strong 1v1. And I do think he's got that capability to go forward, make things happen. Now, if we just take a look at Pubill's stats here as well. Now, he's played 2,823 minutes this season, 36 appearances for Almeria. And I just think it's absolutely ridiculous, really, some of the stats. Now, when it comes to tackles, quite underwhelming. He is good in the duel, but he just doesn't tackle that much because often Almeria play with him on the ball, so he doesn't have to do too much of that sort of 1v1 defending. Now, as you can see here, he's in the top 15% across Europe for expected goals from a fullback. He's in the top 12% for expected assists and assists for a fullback this season. He's in the top 6% for shots, which is brilliant, and that shows you how progressive he can be and how much I think he will sort of slot into this team for Wolves and how sort of aggressive their fullbacks want to be at times, and I think he will be a key part of that if he does come in. And then you look here, it's brilliant. I mean, he's in the top 4% for shots on target, top 8% for chances created as a fullback, which is really, really impressive. Top 8% for key passes as well. Now, that's a brilliant stat for a side that, to be fair, Almeria don't create a hell of a lot without him sort of down that right flank. So the fact that he is their main outlet is really impressive from a fullback position. And again, top 4% for successful dribbles, which is just absolutely brilliant for him. And also absolutely brilliant for any club that would pick him up this summer. And I do think he's one of them players that consistently, retains possession, regains possession as well. Has a brilliant sort of style of play that would suit Vitor Pereira's system and what he wants from his fullbacks. So I do think Marc Pubill is a very valid option as well. So to conclude the video, who do I think Wolves should use this season? Now, for me personally, I would take the gamble on Ki-Jana Hoever and Matt Doherty being the right-back options next season. It is a massive risk, but I do think if you're going to dip into the market for 10 to 15 million for Pubill, as much as I rate him, I do think he is still very raw, and you do see that in a lot of his defensive statistics, and I do think that that's one thing that Wolves could probably do without. I think Ki-Jana Hoever is very comfortable in both situations, very comfortable in those defensive scenarios, but also very, very promising in attacking transition and in attacking phases of play, and we've seen that for a number of years now. We also go back to when he was at Liverpool, and he was absolutely key in those sort of attacking phases as well, coming through the academy, and when he did play in the first team as well. So I do think for me, Ki-Jana Hoever is worth taking the risk on. Obviously, 1 year older than Pubill, he's already at the club. If you can sort of, get a good season out of him, extend his contract, keep him at the club, you've got a really solid player there for the next 8 to 9 years. If not, then you've obviously, you've utilised him. You can say that you've tried, and obviously Wolves will look to sort of probably extend his contract still, I'd imagine, because they want to get some value out of Ki-Jana Hoever no matter what happens to him this season. But I do think he's the best option. I think for me, Pedro Lima deserves a loan or needs a loan, or perhaps to stay around the squad a bit and sort of play in the cups again and stuff like that. But I don't think he's necessarily ready even for that personally. I think he needs to be playing consistently to go up that level and to get used to the physicality. So I do think he will deserve a loan. Matt Doherty, I think you still have obviously got to keep around the club. He can play that right centre-back role, as I said. Can play as a wing-back, can play as a flat full-back if Vitor Pereira wanted to change to a 4 in scenarios in games. And I just think he's obviously the most experienced head and knows the club very well. So I think he's absolutely key to keep around the squad. And then for me, Pubill is probably, if I was going to bring a right back in, he would be the option. It would have been Kyle Walker-Peters in order to obviously fill the homegrown quota and bring him in. I think it would have been absolutely brilliant. So he can play on both sides. But obviously West Ham have picked him up now. So I don't think that's a viable option. But I do think for me, Ki-Jana Hoever should be the option going into next season. But Wolves should definitely still keep an eye on the right-back market because there are more experienced right-backs you could also go for. And who knows, Semedo might extend, which is absolutely not happening, by the way. But you can't rule it out until the club have confirmed it, although Pereira basically has. Now, let me know what you think about next season, Wolves fans, who you'd like to see at right-back next season, and I'll see you in the next one.